Yo, 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 welcome back to the 1ND podcast. I'm your host, Vikash, and I'm joined by my co host.
Hey, my name is Sagar.
And today, we're going to be talking about our favorite Pokemon regions.
All right, so I think we should just get started with our rankings. You want to
You
start
know
with
what?
number one?
I think we have some screenshots sitting by. You want to start with maybe listing out our favorite Pokemon from the predictor site that we saw, and then that might give a little preview as to what our favorite regions may be.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. You want to go with your favorites? Just give you like a couple, and then I'll give
Let
a
me
couple
list
of
them
mine.
off for you.
Okay, go for it.
Number 1, Gengar. And then
No
from
surprise there. Yeah.
From there, it's Charizard, Mewtwo, Dragonite, Aerodactyl, Ho-Oh, Typhlosion, Marshadow, Zeraora, Raikou, Blaziken, Tyranitar, Alakazam, and then rounding it all off with Lugia. I don't know how many Pokemon that was.
That was a lot of Pokemon. I can see where you may like have your preferences in terms of region. I see a lot of Kanto bias in there. I'll give you mine now. I think you may see a little bias from me too. So number one, I have Latios, the goat Pokemon. Then I have Zapdos. Then I have Decidueye, followed by Kadabra for a very special reason. Then Vikavolt, Rayquaza, Blaziken, Electivire, Greninja, Torterra, Lucario, and then rounding off my top 10 is Luxray.
And I know your favorite type
Yeah,
is
you could
electric, so
tell.
you can. That is very evident in that.
Yeah, there's
Even though
like
your
four
number one
electric
isn't.
Pokemon there.
I mean, you do like psychic Pokemon as well.
I do.
Yeah, I'm sure you can tell from my top. I'm pretty much an old head when it comes to Pokemon.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, how about we can start with our bottom and work our way up, favorite region wise.
Okay. Sure.
Me personally, starting at the bottom. See, there are a few Pokemon games where I've either never played any of it or I've, only played a bit. And so starting at the bottom, I have to go with Alola. It seems like a great concept, but I never played through this region, so I don't know much about it. I will say I am caught up with most of the Pokemon from every region, since I do like to play Pokemon Showdown from time to time, and random battles really help me learn the meta and all the new Pokemon. And I didn't necessarily like a majority of the Pokemon in this region. I did find the new forms of previous Pokemon to be an interesting concept. But the starters were not the greatest in my opinion. I know you're a Decidueye stan, but aside from that, I personally am not a huge fan. And from this region, some of my top favorite Pokemon were from this region, right? Zeraora, Marshadow were in my top Pokemon, but they're just cool. I don't know if that adds much to the region itself. Then I like Wishiwashi, Minor, Mimikyu, those types of Pokemon. They're very interesting. They're very interesting in terms of their abilities, and they're kind of OP because of them. But it's still pretty cool.
Oh no, yeah, for sure. I honestly, since okay, again, I played the game, and I think it's a good point to note that how many of the games we've played has a big impact on our opinion of how we feel about the regions. So the games I haven't played, I skipped Generation 5, which was Unova, and that's the only region I skipped. So I actually played through Alola, and it's not my favorite region, but it's up there for me, just based on how positive my gameplay was through the entire region. For me, my least favorite region would definitely have to be Kalos, and that's I think all attributed to the game. I really found that the region was very very small. It was not really fleshed out. The Pokemon were great. I mean, the starters were okay, but like for you, Alola may not have the best starters. For me, they didn't really have that many great starters. So, if I'm not mistaken, their starters were Snivy, Tepig, and um, it wasn't Oshawott. I forget what it was, but I just found. Oh no, sorry. The Unova starters included Delphox, uh, Greninja's pre-evolution, and then I forget the grass one. But again, it just shows you how forgettable it was for me. I just
I
found
see
it.
what you're saying. I think you started off it by saying this was your Kalos region.
Yeah. So the Kalos region, right? So what were the starter? Okay, yeah. So it was Chespin, Fennekin, and Fruki, right? So again, not a big fan of Chespin. Very forgettable for me. Fennekin, at first I thought, hey, it's a cool concept, but then the whole ear fuzz growing out of the like ears. That's supposed to be fake flames, but it just hair was kind of creepy. And then Froakie, the final form, Greninja is a really good Pokemon, but that's one of the highlights from the region. Just the gameplay for me was so poor in how terrible it was and how not fleshed out the region was. It felt like they really rushed to put the game together. And what they were doing in this generation specifically was putting their original Pokemon game, from the DS, and putting that on a new platform. So it was a very transformative time for the games, and I feel like they didn't really flesh out all the things they could have. So it resulted in a gameplay that was really easy, really long, like really fast paced. Like I was done within 15 hours of the entire story, and it was a pretty easy game. So for me, the gameplay really impacted my opinion of this region, and that's why I think it's my least favorite.
I see. I can go more into detail because that's coming up soon. Let me finish off my thoughts about Alola though, because I have some questions for you. Because they introduced a lot of new concepts, especially with the Ultra Beasts and the evolving legendary, and the lore behind them is kind of strange. I'm a big lore type of guy, and like, how are these Ultra Beasts? Yeah, I understand they come from different dimensions or something, and yet they're classified as Pokemon. I guess it makes sense. You kind of have to go with the game, but it's just a strange lore for me. And then I'm not completely familiar with how the whole Cosmog sort of line, like, oh, what is that? Like, doesn't it evolve into the legendary Pokemon of the game?
Yeah, it's a really weird story point, but again, this leads into my gameplay opinion and like how it shapes.
Okay, so I'll wait for you to explain that later.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of the legendaries are cool. Some of the lore behind the Island Guardians is really interesting, like Tapu Koko and the other Tapus. I found that like a very cool legendary aspect. And that again lends to me liking, the lake legendaries from the Sinnoh region. Azelf Uxie and the other one I'm forgetting the name. Mesprit, yeah. So I really love those legendaries, and I found like a similar vibe coming from these Tapus. And I think again that led me to like Alola more than you probably did.
Okay, and I definitely know I will be playing this game in the future. It's just a matter of when. And from what I see, the region itself seems pretty small, and the graphics seem pretty nice. A step up from previous versions. So I'm not saying it's bad, but to me, from an outsider's perspective, I suppose, it doesn't seem all that great. I will say, sometimes when I'm studying for like my certification exams, I listen to game soundtracks, and I remember liking the soundtrack for Alola, which is not something I can say for actually a majority of the other regions. But also, for those who haven't listened yet, I know this is not a Pokemon soundtrack, but my favorite game soundtrack is called Celeste. Give it a listen. Great for studying, great for car rides. It's honestly a great soundtrack. But again, yeah, I haven't played this region, so I'm sure my opinion will change of it once I play it in the future.
Yeah, for sure. And like when I went in first, I was really skeptical, but I came out pretty satisfied playing the game. And so you want to move on to your next least favorite, I guess?
Yeah, let's go for that because it's the Kalos region. So
okay,
piggybacking off of you again. I never finished X or Y. I played on a ROM a little bit, but it wasn't gripping enough for me, or maybe something took my attention at that point. And I'm sure I'll come back to it eventually because like I said, I do want to play through all the games. But they had an interesting concept. I saw with their map, they tried to split the region into 3 separate portions, as in like there's a coastal region, a central like city type region, and then a mountainous region. But from the map itself, aside from the extremes where you can see the ocean, you can see the mountains, it didn't really seem like there was much differentiation between the 3 sections. It's just something that the game told you there was. And I will say the Pokemon were actually pretty interesting. The starters were they were okay, and the starting bird Pokemon was useful. Wasn't that Talonflame, right?
Talonflame was a great Pokemon. I think it's definitely up there in favorite Pokemon for a lot of people.
And you've got your classic flying bug Pokemon. Aegislash is an awesome concept, and I think this was the region that introduced the fairy type, right?
I do believe so, yeah.
And so yeah, there was some good aspects of it. Halucha's pretty cool too. Gudra is one of those. I love the goofy looking dragons. Dragonite and Gudra, those are fun for me. So Gudra is a cool Pokemon. The legendaries are pretty cool. But it just seems like it continued the trend of easy Pokemon games. I believe this is the game you told me that had. Was it this one or another one where
it was
had
this one. It's X and Y, where the gym leaders. Oh my goodness! Like, I thought after facing the first couple that only had like 2 or 3 Pokemon that, hey, maybe it'll get better, because even in the old games, even if they had 5, the challenge was not really there. But in this case, it's just a cakewalk, and like even in the Elite Four, they have like 4 Pokemon each. It's like a complete joke in terms of difficulty in the gameplay.
and each of them only had maybe 2 or 3 moves total.
Yeah, so the movesets weren't even designed in a way where it would be even the least bit competitive. Like, they had no coverage moves. Moves that would make sense on a Pokemon just didn't exist. So you could often just go in there and not even have to worry about anything.
Man, this just makes me want to put it at the bottom right now. But I mean, the Mega Evolution was also an interesting addition. And along with the Galar region, it introduced the possibility of parallel universes. And I love me some good controversies. And so it seems like an interesting theory to where, maybe there's one universe with Mega Evolution, there's another with Dynamax and Gigantamax. You never know. And there's an interesting YouTube video that explains some of this. I don't know if you've seen it yet. I'll show it to you later. The person who commentates it sounds like that OG Pokemon narrator in the anime. I love it. But I also read that Mega Evolution, it's kind of torturous to the Pokemon, and that's why you can only do it in battle, and that's kind of messed up. So I don't know. It kind of takes away from the game a little bit. But the screenshots that I've seen from the game, it shows some pretty cool animations. But I also have heard that it seems like an unfinished game, as if there seems like there should have been a third game in this series, like a Pokemon Z.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Just for example, like, typically you have your, Ruby, Sapphire, then Emerald, right? You have your Diamond, Pearl, and then Platinum, where you cover that third legendary. But I think this also started the trend of having these legendary Pokemon that don't have really fleshed out narratives. So, in this case, Zygarde didn't even translate into Pokemon Sun and Moon, where you could collect Zygarde parts and hopefully get the 100% form. So they really didn't flesh out the third legendary in their own story. They really focused on Xerneas and Yveltal. And just again with the region, they did have a unique story point of the man who created this ultimate weapon that was used in this ancient war that Pokemon fought. And I felt that it was a really good story, and it could have been something so much better, but I feel like they did not flesh any of it out. They just left it till the end, where you beat the evil team, and I can't even remember the evil team's name. It was that forgettable. I think it was Team Flame or something. It just was. They had so much potential in the story that just they did not realize, and I think that again led to me being disappointed in the region overall.
It also seems like I did read something to where there was a railway that goes off into a mountain that goes into nothing, which to me it could come back in a future game. I would like to see them Johto it up and connect it to another region and actually create a huge story with it. Maybe they missed their chance with the next game, but that could be something in the future. Hopefully they revisit it, maybe in a remake or something, whatever, decade from now.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, honestly, talking about it makes me want to put it right like under Alola.
Yeah, no, but like that's a good point, because if you look at what they're doing with Sword and Shield right now, where they really just have your main region and then everything around it is kind of clouded out in like the map you get with the game. So it's kind of hard to tell what's around your region. And now they're, introducing this DLC with new areas that you get to explore. And I think, like you said, they could do something similar to that through like a DLC expansion. Like, hey, okay, so just for example, Kalos is based in Europe, right? It's based in Paris. And the new region, the Galar region, is based in the UK. So both are part of Europe, until Brexit happened. So what you could have is like DLC that takes you to, that region that's unknown in Kalos, and then maybe they could find a way to connect that back to Kalos. It's just a wild theory, but again, it could be possible, given that they left all this room for development.
Man, I hope it happens. I hope it happens. Otherwise, it's one of the worst regions that exist. You wanna talk about your next worst region?
Yeah, so for me, it would definitely have to be Unova. And it doesn't really have anything to do with any bad points about it. It's just that I'm so unfamiliar with the region, right? The starters are okay. Tepig is probably one of the most forgettable starters for me. Like, I would never use it. I've barely used it in Showdown or anything. Oshawott is okay. Again, its evolution seems nice. Same with Snivy. I think it's one of the cooler grass starters. But I did not play this game, so the only game I didn't play was the Gen 5 game. And so this just lends me to not being familiar with the region as much. And that leads me to put it as my second least favorite. And again, it would have been my least favorite, but since Kalos was so bad and I had such a bad experience with it, I put Unova as the second least, just out of, disrespect for the Kalos region.
You know a game's bad when you put a game that you've never even played above it. Oh man. Should we move on to the next?
Oh, yeah.
Because
sure.
my next is Unova.
Oh, your next is Unova. I'm guessing it's for similar reasons.
Well, I've played a bit of it actually. I recorded some of it and put it on a YouTube channel ages ago. But I wasn't a huge fan. It was a strange region and there's not much to it. But I heard Black and White 2 made it a much better game. Team Plasma was actually an interesting evil organization, and the end storyline was actually fun. So this is one I would probably come back to. Maybe not Pokemon Black and White, but I'd probably play Pokemon Black and White 2. And with Team Plasma, back to the evil organization, they had somewhat of a noble cause, and I like when you can agree with the enemy in some sort of way. It kind of adds to the story a little bit. There definitely seems to be a lot of different aspects of this region, which adds to the game. I do like how there are different ways to deviate from the game, but I think one of the reasons I stopped playing was because those deviations were kind of convoluted at times. They introduced quite a few cool Pokemon, but they weren't the greatest in my opinion. The Pokemon in general that were introduced. I like the dragons. The legendaries were interesting. From the other regular Pokemon, I like Klinklang, Zoroark, Archeops, and Sigilyph. With Sigilyph, I do wish there was some sort of pre-evolution, kind of like Xatu, like a cute little thing that evolves into a Sigilyph. I think they missed their boat on that one. And I do like Volcarona too. And I agree with you, the starters were okay. Superior, obviously. No, maybe I don't want to say obviously, but probably the best of all the three. For the final evolutions. The soundtrack was okay for this game as well. And I guess the ranking, again, more so was due to the lack of time I've put into this game. So I'm sure in the future I'll give Black and White 2 a try.
Okay, yeah, for sure. And yeah, I would agree. Again, I feel like I need to play the games and I'll get an appreciation for them. Just as another point, whenever I evaluate a region, story for me is really important in the games. I value like story and the gameplay heavily, which is why Galar was a little bit of a bummer for me, and that's why I would have to put it next on my list. Just because the game again felt like it was missing something. The entire time I played through it, I felt like there should be more to do. And I think that lends to the fact that again, they made this big switch to a new platform, and I feel like every time the Nintendo company and Game Freak tries to move to a different platform, they have all these ideas they want to accomplish, but then they can't because of the limited time frame they have with their yearly release window. I feel like all that in combination again led in with the fact that they're trying to maximize profit and limit costs, leads to them creating a product that's subpar, and leads me to put Galar next on my list. Now, the idea of having UK as like a region to base it off of is really interesting and cool, and it has some really good starters in my opinion. Sobble, I just couldn't be bothered with. Grookey is really cute, and I like the whole drum concept with using like a stick to drum on things. That's really cute, and the way it evolves into something that uses drums and has like sound-based moves. I really like that fact, and they really emphasize sound in this region. Like, so for example, you have Rillaboom, you have Toxtricity, and Toxtricity, for example, has its ability, I think it's called Punk Rock, where it amplifies sound-based moves. They also introduce an item that increases the attack power of sound-based moves. I think it's throat spray. So I like how they're trying to test these new typings, and sound type may eventually be something in the future, but they're being creative with how they're trying to introduce new forms of attacking. So I do appreciate those points in the region, but again, just the overall gameplay experience with the story being kind of lackluster. Again, there was actually really no evil organization in the game. And spoiler alert, if you've seen or if you've played any of the game, you pretty much know who the evil villain is, at the beginning. As soon as you launch the game, it's the chairman. Could not have been any more obvious. So I think those lend to me having Galar next. But I will say some of the strong points are some of the Pokemon. I really love Dragapult. That Ghost Dragon typing is really cool. Ghost Pokemon are some of my favorite. I love the fact that it was a bulky physical attacker. Cinderace is slowly and surely becoming one of my favorite starters. I've had a blast using it in competitive, especially pairing it with moves like Sucker Punch. It really throws people off. So for those reasons, Galar had its strong points, and now I'm getting to the part in the list where I really don't dislike those regions. I just feel like there's more regions that I like better. So nothing against Galar in that sense of Pokemon typing and creativity, but I feel like the game could have been fleshed out more.
Well, if you finished your spiel on Galar, maybe we can move on to the next region, because my next region, personally, is Galar.
Okay.
And so it'll be a nice little addition to yours. I do feel as though you said that they had high expectations for the game and that they were in a time crunch. I don't think that's true. I think there was plenty of opportunity and they just wasted it. And there's evidence that they just wasted time. They had time to make new schematics for these Pokemon and make this such an amazing game. And yet, it just fell flat, in my opinion. I couldn't rank the bottom three, given the amount of I couldn't rank them accurately, I should say, given the amount of time I've played them. But from here on, I've played every single game in their entirety.
Yeah.
And so this game, it was just way too easy. I mean, I know I took a break from Pokemon, and I know a lot of people say that the games are just way too handholdy, but it's just a cakewalk. But it's still enjoyable. Don't get me wrong. I've played 100 something hours of it.
I think we've both put over 100 hours into the game.
Dude, I mean, but most of it is just because of that easiness, because they make it so easy to train your Pokemon and make them actually competitive. This is the first Pokemon game where, you could get viable competitive Pokemon without really breaking your back and training them from day one and trying to get these max EVs. You can just get them in much easier fashion. So I do like that portion of the easiness, but the gameplay itself, I mean, I'm easily entertained. So I do like the wild area. It's an interesting twist to the game, and the introduction of Gigantamax and Dynamax, like I said earlier, introduces an interesting storyline that gives way more credence to the theories, like Pokemon Multiverse. And I think it was a great way for the series to enter the world of the Nintendo Switch, aside from the Let's Go games, which I didn't play. I hope they can expand on this idea, though, in the future. I believe, the next Pokemon game that may come out, it should be a remake of Sinnoh, which should be great. More on that later. But the real explorable the only explorable area was the wild area, and even then it wasn't very explorable. And a lot of the expectation going into this region was that you could explore, since a lot of it looked like it was ported from Breath of the Wild, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know, and I think one thing, just building off that exploration point, is that typically in these games you have these caves and things you can explore through. And I think this was one of the more glaring issues, where they had a cave, but it was basically just a route where you just come in through one point and you exit the other. There was no maze to it. There was no exploring to it. There were not any, tricks to say, oh, you went the wrong way or there's dead ends. But just a very narrow path through a cave, and you got out really easily. So I think that builds on your point of the exploration not being that great in the game at all.
Exactly, and that also builds to my next point. The routes were not really anything crazy. The scenery was amazing, don't get me wrong, but the routes themselves, there was nothing really to them. They were very straightforward, and man, even talking about this right now, it makes me want to move it downward. And it's it's just interesting. If you take the wild area away from it, what's really cool about this game? You know, Team Loud was trash. It's really more of a nuisance than anything. The legendaries, probably lower tier than any other game. And I just hope the expansion that comes later adds more of a second game feel rather than a small little island or two. I don't know much about the expansions yet. I didn't watch or read much about it besides what you've told me and sent me. And in terms of the Pokemon introduced, the starters were pretty cool. Obviously, I chose the worst one in Sobble. I thought it would be a cool little sniper Pokemon, but it's not. I do think that they could have done a much better job of the renders, like I said earlier. It seemed like they were pretty lazy on that front. They just ported from previous games. And honestly, I don't know why this game is so high. I'm officially moving this below Unova. This is trash. I'm just kidding. But yeah, like you said, there are some great Pokemon. Dragapult was amazing. It's super fast, super high attack. And a high attack ghost Pokemon is pretty cool to see. Grimmsnarl, also a great Pokemon. Frostmoth is a cool Pokemon. But other than that, I can't really think of many really cool Pokemon from my perspective. I mean, the soundtrack was pretty cool. I'm a sucker for a good soundtrack, and the gym battle soundtrack was great, and the rival soundtrack was even better. But I'm looking forward to the next Pokemon game because this also feels like an unfinished product, and I feel like the expansion pass will help in that aspect, but it kind of goes with that Kalos region. I mean, not to the same extent because I've never played it, but also it doesn't seem as much of a unfinished product, but it just makes you want more. I think a majority of our game time, 100 hours of our game time probably, are for training our Pokemon for competitive reasons. We finished the story in no time, really.
Yeah, no, I think the competitive aspect of it is I think they're trying to build, encourage more players to get into that aspect of the game because they made it so easy to do so. And I feel like that's why they introduced the whole candy aspect through the dens. But one of the glaring issues there was, just for example, I was done with my 4th gym, and just for the heck of it, I thought, hey, let me use all my candies on my Vikavolt, right? So, not, like, before the 5th gym, I have a level 97 Vikavolt. So in terms of gameplay and mechanics, that just throws it off. Like, if I continued using that Pokemon, the rest of the game would have been trash. So I had to measure myself and put that Pokemon in a box so I wouldn't use it, right? And even then, I could catch a wild Pokemon at a certain level, and it would do a pretty decent job of beating all the trainers I was fighting. I think that the 2 new expansion pass places will add to the game. I know that the one difference is, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that the entire area is going to be like free roam, like Breath of the Wild and the Wild area, where you can control the camera angle. So I think that should alleviate some of the issues. It'll be a little more explorative in that sense. And I feel like they did a really genius thing here by limiting the Pokemon, because what they did is they took out 50% of the Pokemon only to reintroduce them to you and get you hype for Pokemon that should have been in the game in the first place. I think that was a really sneaky and shifty marketing move that they pulled there. And I think they pulled a fast one on most people, but I think that's a pretty shady thing to do. I feel like if they had the ability, they should have put this Pokemon in the first place. And again, that knocks some points off for me for this region.
I feel like the half Pokedex was actually a good thing. I think limiting the amount of Pokemon you can get kind of helped in terms of, this was the first game I've actually, completed the Pokedex.
Same.
I mean,
yeah.
I've completed previous ones, but that was through, having multiple games, trading one across one another, having my friends help me and everything. I mean, I guess this is more of the same since they're region-specific Pokemon, but those are tougher to really get in any game. But yeah, this one, I don't know, it left me wanting so much more. It was so underwhelming. It makes me want to play that Temtem game, man.
Yeah, no, the Temtem game seems like it'll be really interesting. I definitely want to give that a go, and I think it builds on that whole multiplayer aspect. And they're introducing this new thing where you can raid dens with your friends in the new DLC region, so I think there's some room to grow. And again, yeah, this leads to like a great starting point for a new game potentially in the next year. So,
Yeah.
Moving on from Galar, you want to talk about your next favorite region?
Well, I think I skipped over your next one. And really quick, before we move on to your next, let's let's say Sagar and I will probably be playing Temtem, a co-op version, and we'll probably be posting it on YouTube. If you guys are interested, check it out.
Oh yeah, for sure. Definitely give that a watch whenever we post it. We'll definitely let you guys know on the podcast and through our social media whenever we decide to upload the clips. And we'll make a YouTube channel and let you know where you can follow us on YouTube as well.
For sure.
Okay.
So yeah, I think so. We moved past your fourth.
Okay, we moved
from
past
the bottom.
my fourth. Okay, so now again we're getting into the territory where all these regions are really good. But in my opinion, the next region for me has got to be Johto. And that may be very unpopular, with the original Pokemon players.
And with me.
Yeah, and with you. I think I know where Johto ranks for you. But again,
Wrong.
unpopular opinion here. Chikorita is probably one of the most trash starters that any game has. I just hate the Pokemon. Just underwhelming.
Next to Decidueye.
It's ugly. No, Decidueye is goated, okay? Totodile, unpopular opinion. I never cared for. I didn't care for Totodile. Crocodile was meh. And for Alligator, to me, just looked really ugly. Like, I just never liked it. Now, I will say, Cyndaquil, Quilava, and Typhlosion are, like, one of my favorite starter lines. And I'm surprised none of them were in my top 10 when I did that Pokemon top 10 quiz. And, that's one of the reasons that it's now my fourth least favorite. And again, it also goes to the fact that my only gameplay experience with the Johto region has been through Heart Gold and Soul Silver. So I've never had that full original Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance playthrough of these games. So I think that may impact my opinion on it. Because that was not the first game I started with. The first game I started with was the Kanto region with Leaf Green and Fire Red, which I really loved. So I feel like if I was introduced to this region first, it would hold a more special place in my heart. That in addition to the fact that the legendaries were cool, but I never really felt that drawn into the story. It had some really good mechanics with, the Team Rocket story in the game. You had the whole Slowpoke tail incident, which, still sticks in my mind as a really good story point. I still remember it to this day. So I think that was really memorable. But overall, again, the new Pokemon that they added to this region, in comparison to other regions, I don't think were that much because you really have a continuation of Kanto Pokemon. And again, I don't know the full timeline of how the games work. So if Kanto had the 150 and Johto had a certain number, would they technically be in the Johto region first if the Johto game came out first? That's something I really don't... I'm fuzzy on that, so I really don't want to comment on that. But I feel like the game overall was good. Like, Heart Gold and Soul Silver rank in the top 5 for me in terms of Pokemon games. So that really boosted my opinion of the game. But again, my lack of exposure to the original games, in combination with the fact that I love the other regions so much, at least Johto being here. So it's really a process of elimination. Like, hey, I like these regions better, and that's why Johto ends up where it is for me.
I see. I mean, I can't complain about that. If I talk about it right now, I'm probably going to sound a little salty, as I have already.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be surprised where Johto ranks for me, but I can talk about Johto a little later.
Okay. So you want to go with your next region?
I think it's going to be a surprise to you, dude.
Okay, go for it.
Number 3. We're in our top 3 now.
Yeah.
Kanto.
Kanto's number 3.
Yes, sir. And let me tell you, I want to put this higher, but I'm trying to differentiate it from my bias and my childhood, essentially.
Are you sure it's number 3? Because I think we have Hoenn, Sinnoh, and Johto, right? So Kanto would...
My apologies. We're on number 4, aren't we?
Yeah.
Shoot. Number 4.
It's all good.
Sinnoh.
Okay, there you go.
A fun region to play through. Good catch. Sinnoh was a great region. I do think the fogged areas were strange, and I don't know why they included it. It seemed pretty unnecessary. But aside from that, the progression was fun, and the routes were actually meaningful. And built on previous generations as well, which is something I like to see. And that's evident with, Pokemon like Togetic, Rhyperior, Electivire, Magmortar. I like that little twist that they gave to that. That's really the first game where we were introduced to this, holding item type evolution, which I find kind of annoying, but at the same time, it's an interesting addition. The Battle Frontier, great post game, and it was built upon the Hoenn variant. And as for the negatives, I feel like they went a little overboard with the legendaries. Like, weren't you able to capture almost all the previous ones through some sort of event?
Oh yeah, I
And
think that was true for that region. Yeah.
right, and they were all coded into the game. It's not like it wasn't there in the first place and the event added a new place into the game. They were all in there, and you just had to unlock that place, which is kind of annoying. Why have, like, events like that? I understand what they were trying to do, make it a more community aspect type thing, but it was annoying to people like you and I who, weren't really exposed to that sort of being able to go to GameStop and get these Pokemon.
Yeah, I
But
think
in
that's one of the major
hindsight,
drawbacks to what. Just to add to what you're saying, there is that when we were playing these games, we weren't adults yet, so at the time, it's hard to coordinate with your parents who may be busy working or doing other things. Like, hey, I need you to drive me to this place. It's really important. I need this Pokemon. It's not really a compelling reason for a parent to take your kid there, right? So in that sense, the accessibility to some of the Pokemon was very limited for kids.
especially for us, bro, our parents would be like, "Oh, you want a Pokemon? Oh no, you should be studying right now.
Exactly.
You have SAT in 4 years. You must be studying now." I'm like, man, come on, let me get a Jirachi or something right now. But I mean, so I was thinking about the Pokemon in this region, and for me, it was kind of lackluster. The starters were all pretty awesome, and from there, it kind of tailed off really. But I enjoyed the snowy parts of the region as well, and the soundtrack, not the greatest, but not bad either. Team Galactic, a middle of the road organization in my opinion. And overall, I enjoyed the new terrain they introduced. It really built upon Gen 3, and I liked how these first 4 generations, you could really see that they were trying to make, they were transforming it, but basing it off the previous generation that came in. And it was a great way to push a new new game for the DS, and Galar should have taken a page out of this game's book by trying to utilize everything to all the capabilities of the DS. Trying to in the Galar region should have tried to use all the capabilities of the Switch, but I don't think they really did. And I would love to see a remake of this game. Obviously, it's next in the timeline, and honestly, with every new system that comes out, I would love to see a remake of every single of these top games for me. Which I wish they made the Let's Go series a little cooler. I really want a better Johto Kanto remake, for the Switch. That would be really cool for me. But yeah, Sinnoh, great region. I enjoyed it.
I think, yeah, so I had Johto 4, so Sinnoh would be next for me. I think, yeah, so again, I think I agree with you here. Now, in my top 10, I had a couple Sinnoh Pokemon in there, right? So I had Torterra, which is kind of surprising given how I really loved all 3 of the starters. I think Sinnoh has a good argument for having some of the best starters in any of the regions. Another Pokemon I had from the Sinnoh region was Luxray, and the other was Electivire. This shows my really big bias towards electric types. I think electric types are some of the coolest Pokemon out there. I really love how it works, and just in general, I'm a fan of electricity and electricity powered superheroes. So Thor is one of my favorites. He controls lightning and thunder. So just in general, those are some cool aspects of it.
So your favorite character in My Hero Academia is?
It is not. No, it's not that. Okay, you cannot. That's not fair. That character's
Why not?
trash. That character's trash.
Why not?
Because he is stupid whenever he uses electricity, and it doesn't work.
Okay, I mean Kaminari, yeah, he's okay. I mean he once he gets his quirk better, I'm sure he'll be cool.
Yeah, for sure. But
Why is his name
Mirio's
Kaminari?
good.
Why is his name Lightning? That's kind of lame.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
It's weird, but it is what it is. I mean, it's
All right, yeah, sorry for that tangent.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. So I think just building off that, you typically have those really early on Pokemon that are like a staple in your team. It could be like the bird type, like your standard bird Pokemon in company with your starter. In this case, you had the opportunity of catching, Luxio, was it? I'm not sure. Shinx, yeah.
Shinx. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Shinx, again, such a cool experience to have that electric Pokemon that early on in the game, and then you build it to a Luxray, which becomes one of your stronger Pokemon because you had it since you were starting in Route 1. I think that was a really cool touch. I love Electivire, and I love what they did here by adding new Pokemon that were not completely new, but they were like extensions to evolutionary lines, right? So you had Magmortar, and you had Magnezone, and so I think that was a really cool twist they added. And Electivire's, again, I think sixth favorite for me, so he's really high up there for me. And just everything about it, it was a cool looking Pokemon. It's very intimidating, and just the design in general was really cool. And some of my favorite legendaries that are not in my top 10 come from here. Two of them would be Darkrai and Cresselia. The whole design concept of Cresselia with the moons and what they were going for there was really cool. And again, it was a challenge catching Cresselia because it was a roaming legendary. So you had to hunt it down, which added like another layer of fun to the game. And then Darkrai, again, just that cool typing and the Dream Eater move. And just the myth behind it was really awesome. And again, unfortunately, I didn't have access to like the events, so I just used an action replay, and you can easily get it coded and get the item for it. So I got to experience all those things, and it was like a really cool experience. Those are some of my favorite legendaries. Their designs are awesome. Their myth is cool, and that's why Sinnoh really ranks up there for me.
Yeah, I never had an action replay, so I was never able to get all those legendaries. Never used it to turn all my weeds in Animal Crossing to money or anything of the sort.
You should definitely invest in one. You'll get your return on investment back real quick in Animal Crossing.
Oh man. Well, you want to move on to the next? I kind of spoiled mine.
I guess since you did go on, you could say it.
Let's go. All right, act surprised. Ready? No way, dude. How'd you know?
I don't know. It was just a guess.
Bro, that's wild. All right, so honestly, yes, I wanted to put this higher on my list. My top three, honestly, interchangeable if I'm being completely honest. But like I said, I was trying to, see this from a non-biased point of view. Even though this was my childhood, I've played so many games on my hand-me-down Game Boy Color, and I never got tired of it. Pokemon Red, Pokemon Yellow, probably, my two most played games ever. Ever, honestly. And the thing is, I was playing these Game Boy Color games even when people got the Game Boy Advanced and whatnot, because I never got one until much later. I think I got my Game Boy Advanced when people had Emerald already and were playing it. And that's when I got a Game Boy Advance. And that time people had Game Boy Advance SPs. And I had to wait until my cousin got tired of his Game Boy Advance to get one. So, yeah, I was kind of late onto the Game Boy Advance train. But you can't deny the greatness of this region. I feel as though you have to look at this in a vacuum, considering each generation after introduced so many different mechanics, and this is the foundation of everything. The soundtrack, such a chilling song that I don't think I'll ever forget, and I enjoy that mix of emotions that you get from it, and I don't think it's one that, it's ingrained in the minds of anyone who's played the games, if you've played with sound, which I hope you do, and I just love how they introduced this scary aspect to the game, and I don't think it's been matched in any other game besides maybe the Old Chateau in Sinnoh, which I didn't mention earlier. And these elements are lacking in all the other games, and that adds this sort of fascination to the lore of the game. And I'm sure you even remember that sound.
Oh yeah, I mean, whenever you mention like Lavender Town, I can hear it in my head. Like that's how memorable it is to me. So like, it definitely leaves a lasting impact on, whoever played the game. Just that eerie vibe you get, just the tone set in the town and how somber it is, and the whole tower aspect of it. I think it was like really, really well done. And again, it built on that lore that a region should have.
And it was such a small town, but it has so much story built into it.
Exactly.
And the fact that, you meet probably the nicest old man ever, who may or may not have created Mewtwo. Spoiler alert, he did. But, man, dun, 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 dun. Oh my god, that's just, it brings goosebumps sometimes.
You just got us copyright striked.
Never, dude. I don't think they'll get it from that. I'm not that good. But yeah, these elements are honestly lacking in all the other games. And Lavender Town introduces such a gripping storyline, which I don't think has been matched either, with Cubone and Marowak and their relationship, and how, Marowak was killed by Team Rocket. And that's something they don't really touch on in future games. But moving on from Lavender Town, which I think it might be my favorite city of all time, given how much I've talked about it. But I love the original 151 Pokemon, and I love how the game was actually challenging. Like, most people started off with, one. There was one clear fan favorite, right?
You mean Bulbasaur?
No, not Bulbasaur, dude. You know the favorite, man.
Squirtle.
Close,
Oh.
Yeah, Charmander.
Oh,
Obviously,
okay, yeah.
Charmander fan favorite. So many remakes. Mega Evolution, Gigantamax. Charizard is beloved by everyone. But most people start with that Charmander and then immediately have to face Brock and that rock type gym. And then right after, you're like, oh man, that was really tough. I had to really train for that one. And then they have to go through Misty. And Misty Starmie, no pushover to the other starters either. And the Bill side quest was pretty interesting too, with him, switching bodies.
Oh yeah, no, that was cool. And again, I think potentially that may have been foreshadowing towards some of my favorite games of all time, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. So
Dude,
yeah, you never know.
Mystery Dungeon, honestly, such a great spin-off. Probably the greatest spin-off I've played.
Yeah, it's definitely up there. Pokemon Ranger is another good one, the original one. I know the second and third iteration of the game were, not well received, but there's definitely been some good spin-offs. And, some of that may have been, drawing inspiration from the original games.
Yeah, man. I'm just looking forward to the next Mystery Dungeon. It seems like it's going to be fun.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think adding it to the new platform for the Switch is going to be really cool. I did hear that it may just be a remake of the original game, which I wouldn't mind because the original games were so much fun to play through, and the story was great. Maybe they may throw some new twists and turns in there, some new battle dynamics. But overall, I think it'll be a really good game.
Yeah, for sure. As long as they utilize the Switch to the fullest, unlike Galar, I'm sure it'll be fine. I haven't seen much about it, really at all, besides what you've told me. But still, looking forward to it, that's for sure. But going back to Kanto, I think Team Rocket is probably my favorite evil organization. Because they're actually truly evil. They seek to exploit Pokemon for money, and that just makes sense. That's what that's what most evil organizations do. And Giovanni was actually an awesome boss, and the twist of him being the 8th gym leader was amazing. As a child, dude, I never saw that coming. My feeble little mind. It literally blew my mind at the time. It was an amazing twist.
So I have a question for you regarding that. Do you think if you played, just hypothetical, if you played Sword and Shield, the chairman being the evil guy would have been a surprise to you?
No.
No, right? Same for me.
He's built to be an evil man.
Yeah, exactly.
Except if you saw the short that Pokemon just put out, he seems pretty nice to this little hospital boy. I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh, no, I haven't.
It's on the Pokemon YouTube channel. You have to check it out later. But yeah, the chairman, he looks like an evil guy. And the thing is, we knew Giovanni was evil, but we didn't know he was the 8th gym leader. That's the thing. He's so involved in, the region of Kanto to the point where he's in a position of power. And I love how Team Rocket is actually, building off of that, so involved in the happenings of the region. They've assimilated and have these underground operations and connections, and it reminds me of the mob, and which is I'm sure what they're going for, but it's probably closer to the Japanese Yakuza, because those were also the underground organization over there in Japan. And honestly, bro, I had to talk myself into putting this lower on the list. It really, in my heart of hearts, number one probably, just with my past. This is my childhood, but we'll keep it here. And this game was also no walk in the park, especially when you make it to the Elite Four. The first Elite Four member, Lorelei, that gave people trouble. Her Pokemon just never seemed to die.
Yeah, no, I think that was definitely a major point of it. I'll get into my, opinions about Kanto soon, because, I have 3 left. But I think I should talk about Alola and then jump back into Kanto, since Alola's 3 for me.
All right, hold on. Let me just finish my little gushing story about it so that, I'm not going back to Kanto.
Go for it.
I am a fanboy, obviously. So, just to end it all off, not much more to say. I think Lance is probably my favorite champion. The other great champion was Cynthia. I think those two are probably the best champions in Pokemon history.
I would definitely agree with that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they were great, and your rival is like this funny, cocky guy who's popular and whatnot, and I think I like that little aspect of things. And the sick burn at the end when you beat your rival after you beat Lance, and Professor Oak comes in and he says, "Hey man, I came to see you, and you already lost. You little loser of a grandson."
That was funny.
Come on, man, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
The gym leaders, they were all fun, and bias aside, I think this is an all-time great region. I will say,
for sure.
I have a couple gripes for the region. The guards being thirsty and not letting you through is just strange. Like they have amazing blocking points with the game with HM spots and the Snorlax that's sleeping, and that. But like the guards that didn't let you through, didn't really make sense to me, unless they were on the brink of dehydration or something. But still, they should still if they're dehydrated, you can just walk right past them. So I don't know. That was just a strange block of the game, and I guess I can justify this portion for it being number 3 for me because there's no real post game versus all the other ones, but it was the very first game of its kind, and I mean you can obviously go and get Mewtwo, and then in the future versions of the game you can go to the Orange Islands, but right, it's just amazing game, man. That's my childhood, so
yeah, I could definitely see why
no surprise
it's
there.
up there for you. For me, number 3, I guess it's a surprise to you, would be Alola. I think some of it is recency bias, but I really enjoyed playing through the game. One thing that the game did really well was build on the story. I felt that there was a lot more story going on. Not necessarily the evil organization, which was fairly obvious, but you're following yourself and another character who's essentially traveling together with you through the story. And it just felt enjoyable to play through and have such a story-intensive game. I liked what they did mixing up the gym leader thing to make it trials instead, and there were some trials, one in particular that was actually pretty challenging. I played through Pokemon Sun. I'm forgetting what the trial was exactly, but you had to face a Lilligant, and at the time I had a Rowlet, right? And this thing was really hard to beat because these totem Pokemon that you have to beat have these stat boosts, and they're actually very challenging. So that was actually a pretty tough aspect of it. That's one of the challenges I had. Overall, again, difficulty's not as good as Kanto or, the other games. So that's a little talking point there, but I really enjoy the story. The region being based off Hawaii was really cool. I think you'll find like a little theme going on here with these regions that have a lot of water. I tend to like them better. The Alola region produced some of my favorite Pokemon of all time. Clearly in my top 10 you see Decidueye and Vikavolt. Decidueye may be my favorite starter. I'm not sure. I haven't put it in stone yet, but he's definitely up there. Just the whole aspect of having this owl, which is really cool. And owl Pokemon in the earlier games were kind of lame to me, like Hoot Hoot and Noctowl. They were like meh. Like, okay, I never really cared for them. So having this, grass Pokemon paired with like a ghost typing and this cool like move where it uses the bow and arrow, the entire theme of Decidueye was really cool to me. And then Primarina was an okay water type, nothing really special there for me. And then Incineroar is great. I really love what they're going for. You would think he's like a firefighting, but he's a fire dark because he's a luchador, and I think the whole thing with the dark type and the theories behind it is that he's not really a fighter. He's tricking you into thinking he's a fighter. And like that deception plays into the dark typing. I'm not really 100% on board with that. But I found the typing cool. Its hidden ability, which was Intimidate, was really cool in like competitive Pokemon games. That was awesome. And then Vikavolt is, again, in my top 10. I think Vikavolt is number 5 for me. Again, it's an electric type. It looks super cool. It's modeled after a railgun, which is like a super sci-fi, energy beam laser thing that just,
You said gun, now we're demonetized.
Oh, for sure. Dang it. So that whole railgun aspect, I said it again, is super cool. I like the electric typing. And it was hard to get a Vikavolt. So there's some Pokemon that you have to evolve in certain regions of the game that, come later or come earlier. So you have to plan for those things. So like you may have like this Charjabug, which is a pre-evolution for a majority of the game before you could even evolve the thing. So adding these like limiters in the game was cool. One critique I have is that their Zygarde story building up was not the greatest, where you collect these parts, then eventually you can get it. They didn't really have any story behind that, but I didn't mind. Now, one thing me and you really disagree about on is like HMs and their relevance in games. Personally, I've never been a fan of them. It's not for the difficulty level. I just want to have like this team of 6 where I have all 6 Pokemon that are really cool. I didn't really want to waste a slot with like a Lanoon or something that's an HM slave for Surf, Rock Smash, and all this. So I really appreciated the fact that you skip these HMs, but it's a really creative way of doing so, where you have these Pokemon like Gyarados to take you across water, Maintines to take you across water, and like Charizards and stuff to fly. Mudsdale was another cool Pokemon based off a horse. I think most horse Pokemon in the games are really awesome, and that goes for this one as well. Mudsdale, really cool Pokemon. And using that to travel was really awesome, instead of having like a bike. The one gripe I have is the Rotom Pokédex. It like adds like this partner vibe to the game, where you have this like partner with you who's helping you. It's essentially like a person to give you tips, but a lot of the times it feels kind of handholdy because it tells you where to go. Again, you could ignore it and explore on your own, which I did a lot, so I really never had a problem with it. And just all that paired with these Ultra Beasts, which I felt was a gimmick, but I didn't really mind because they looked so cool and they had like these cool abilities. I feel like that made the game good. Again, the story was on point. The Cosmog thing was a little unpredictable. I was thrown off. I was not predicting Cosmog to be Solgaleo and Lunala, so that gave me a little twist that I was not expecting. And that paired with the fact that the game left me wanting more when I finished it, really told me, hey, this game was really good. I wish I could play more of it. And I wish it had more story, actually. So I feel like those things, like, added up, really pushed this to number 3 for me.
Wouldn't the aspect of you wanting more kind of be a hindrance? Or was it so good that you wanted more? I feel like if they had more islands, it seemed like it would have been a cooler game. Again, I've never played it. It seems like a cool region. I love Hawaii. That seems like a cool place. Juju Smith-Schuster's from there. But do you think that feeling of you wanting more isn't a hindrance to it?
I feel like it was me wanting more, but it wasn't like... It was a different feeling than playing through Sword and Shield, where you left wanting more because there was barely anything. The story left me satisfied, and I was happy with it. I just wished there was more to it because I liked it so much, essentially. So it's like it's a different feeling of wanting more. It's like, in that sense. So like, at the end, the person you're with goes off to a different region. It's hinted at. So I felt like they had room to like incorporate multiple regions into the game. I feel like they really missed out on that opportunity. And if they had that aspect, maybe Alola would be 2 for me. It was a really like a very encapsulating story, and it really launched it up for me. And the twist of having no gyms and having these like island leaders and these totem Pokemon was a cool fact. And then some of the new Pokemon in the game were really awesome. So that's why Alola's 3 for me.
So before we move on, can you explain the Ultra Beasts? Like their different dimension aspect and whatnot? Because like I've said before, I'm really into the lore of games, right? And I can't really understand this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a few years since I've played, so I'm fuzzy on the details. But essentially, yeah, they're basically beings from another dimension. And that may have something to do with, parallel universe theories in the Pokemon timeline. But from what I remember, that aspect of it was not that developed in Pokemon Sun. I know that in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, they had these further developments in the story to like incorporate these wormholes where you can go through these space dimensions. So I think that may have built on the lore. But from what I remember, there wasn't really that much focus on that.
Space dimensions, man. I'll play that eventually, but it does seem like a weird concept to be in a Pokemon game.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to move on to number 2, our second favorite game
Yeah, I think.
or region, I should say?
Yeah, so your number 2 was Kanto, right?
No, my number 3
Oh
was
yeah, your
Kanto.
number 3 was Kanto. Okay, so my number 2 is Kanto. Again, it's like
Okay.
my first game ever. Like being introduced into Pokemon. It holds a special place in my heart. I played through Pokemon Leaf Green first, and I actually picked Blastoise as my starter, which was different from what most people did, picking Charmander. It made Brock really easy for me, and it was a cool battle. And then against Misty, I had a little bit of a challenge because of the water against water. But some of my favorite Pokemon come from this region. So in my top 10, you actually have Kadabra, and there's a interesting fact of why I have Kadabra in my top 10 and not Alakazam. It's because I never really got to use Alakazam. I never had the opportunity to trade with someone to evolve it and then trade it back. That never presented itself for me. So I just used Kadabra all the way through. And even then, Kadabra was a monster. Super fast, and its Psychic dealt serious amounts of damage. I know Gengar is really hot for you. For me, you had Gengar, and for me it was Abra and then Kadabra. So that was really cool. As a little kid, it was hard catching Abra because it would just teleport. So learning how that mechanic worked and, just having fun with that part of it was really awesome. I really loved that. I think Pidgey is such a good bird Pokemon as well. And that final evolution of Pidgeot is so awesome. And when I, check through the Pokédex, what I loved to do as a kid was look at the sizes. And I was so surprised at the size of Pidgeot when I saw, how big it was compared to yourself as a trainer at the time. It's like, dang, this thing is a big bird. So those aspects of it. And then the legendary birds were some of my favorite Pokemon. Zapdos is number 2 all time for me. I just love its design. It's electric type, right up my alley. And it was just a great Pokemon overall. So I'm really hyped for what they do with the new Zapdos form and the DLC. But putting that aside, like you said with the difficulty, I still remember how many times it took me to beat Lance and how I had to strategize to beat him. It was definitely probably the most challenging trainer I have ever played through in an official Pokemon game. There have been some ROMs that make it obscenely difficult, but in the actual Pokemon games, I think Lance was the toughest. And just because those Dragonites, you were really fast, they had great attack, and they could take your hits as well. Because at the time, I do not think I had any ice Pokemon on my team, right? There were pretty limited selection of ice Pokemon in Gen 1 at the time, if I remember correctly. So all that, the difficulty, the story, everything you said prior, really cemented this number 2 for me. In addition to that, I played through Leaf Green and Fire Red, and the whole Team Rocket Tower in, I forget the name of the city. It's the main city with the Psychic type gym leader. Do you know?
Sylph.
Yeah, Sylph.
The Sylph company.
That was a really cool, tower thing where, the tower was really big. So you had a lot to go through. And then you get a Lapras, you fight Giovanni, you get the Master Ball. All super cool. You get to go post-game as well in those games, I believe. And then the fossils are cool. Aerodactyl's a really cool fossil Pokemon. I think it's still, by far, one of the greatest ones out of all the games thus far. It's definitely better than all the new ones, that are fused halves of things, which is, in my opinion, really creepy. So they did it right in those original games. They really set a formula and a bar that was really hard to beat. And I think it still holds up to this day, even though the game is 15, 16 years old now. And then one final thing is that was the first game in which I got my first level 100. So I got a Blastoise level 100 in that game in Leaf Green. And then eventually got my Kadabra there. And I loved that game so much. I played through so much of it. Then Team Rocket in the Moon Cave. I forget if it's called the Moon Cave, but
Mount Moon.
Mount Moon, yeah. I just called it the Moon Cave. Yeah, that was a cool aspect of it.
You should call it the Zubat Cave.
I love what they did with the Safari Zone. Yeah, it's definitely the Zubat Cave. Oh my goodness, how many Zubats there were there. So the Safari Zone was really cool. I get why you have HMs in a game, but even if you did have the HM, they made it somewhat of a challenge to get Surf, which was so integral into you moving on to the end game of the story. by limiting your steps and like making you go through the Safari Zone to get the find the warden to get Surf by giving him his teeth. I think that,
And you have to have the right amount of steps
yeah,
to get
exactly.
there.
So the step and like calculating all that was super cool, super challenging. So that's why Kanto for me is number 2.
Hey man, I wish I put it number 2. I wish I put it number 1.
Who's your number
I
2?
have a question. Well, before we move on to that,
Yeah.
do you prefer the Galarian Zapdos or the original Zapdos?
Oh man. So my favorite color is orange, and my second favorite Pokemon of all time is Zapdos. So I'm gonna go with the new one.
Man, okay. I respect your opinion. And I also, you were talking about Silphco and Saffron City. I do like how right next to that psychic gym, they had a little fighting dojo, which you could get a Hitmonchan or Hitmonlee. And so I thought that was a fun aspect to the game too. And yeah, the fossil Pokemon, I love Kabutops, Ammonite, and Aerodactyl. Aerodactyl's in my top 10. And so, yeah, the fossil Pokemon are great in this game. I know in the new game, they have some lore behind it because in the old days, over there in Europe, they used to just take random fossils and put them together and be like, hey, this is a dinosaur.
Yeah, it's like a new species or something.
Right, and so it's a play on that. So I think I enjoy that aspect of it. It is effed up, but it's pretty interesting how accurate they are. I like that attention to detail that they put into that. But my second favorite region has to be Hoenn. I only played Emerald since I got the Game Boy Advance much later than everyone else. Like I said, everyone had SPs by the time I got my Game Boy Advance. But I feel as though it was such a transformative region, and it had such high expectations coming off the success of Johto and Kanto, and it delivered. They added so many new mechanics, and it was so fleshed out. It feels like such a satisfying game. It also introduced more creativity in that you could create a base, which is something I don't usually do. I never like doing those aesthetic type things, but this is the game where I actually enjoyed creating my own base in Pokemon. And they introduced weather, diving. They added a new layer to biking, in that you have to you have to use your 2 different modes to your bike so that you could get past some things. It was just such a well polished game, and it felt so different as well. The art style is pretty unique compared to all the newer games and the old games. Like the art style, I enjoy it, and I just feel like it's different. And I don't know how to describe it, but it is. And the Pokemon introduced in this region were just amazing. The legendaries were great as well. The starters in this region are probably the 3 best of all time.
I think most people would agree with that.
I'd put them number 1 and then Kanto number 2 personally. But yeah, I liked the story and the lore of this game, and I can't say enough good things about it, man. That being said, I did not like Team Magmar or Team Aqua. They were just kind of weird evil organizations, and I feel like those organizations are what add to the game, because that's part of the reason you play. You're playing through, but you're also fighting this evil organization. And yeah, they were pretty formidable, but like their goals were strange. But I also like that they added those contests, because it added another layer to your Pokemon training. Not only did you have to train them level and power wise, but also for these contests and ribbons. And the exploration is great. The routes were actually fun to go through, and the difficulty wasn't bad either. Steven is probably the number 3 best champion. I guess. I don't know. I didn't really give that much thought. I just blurted it out. But, this region actually had a really good post game. One that, made you stay for a long time, and actually probably the first one that actually makes you train your Pokemon for any purpose so that you can take on that battle frontier. And you could also clone your Pokemon without the use of a Game Shark or Action Replay, which was just a fun little novelty thing, because there was really no point in that. You already had the Pokemon, so here's another one, I guess. But, it was fun. And obviously, Metagross is goated. So, like, this region was awesome. Very fun to play.
And yeah, I agree with everything you said, and then some. I mean, that's why it's my number 1. No surprise there. It kind of follows with the Alolan thing, where I really like these regions where you have this water aspect to it. So you can do a lot of exploring, with the town that was, built on the water with the logs and it's floating everywhere. That was really cool. And that, like, just the way they developed these towns and, like, how creative they were. I still, like, remember a lot of them. For example, I think towards the middle of the game where it's like a city built in the forest. So you have all these tree houses where people live. I thought that was super cool at the time. I still remember that. It was an amazing, like, exploration aspect of the game. Another cool thing was, you had these weather zones. So, like, I don't think they had that in Leaf Green, Fire Red, and other games. I think this is the first game where you got, like, rain pouring down in some places, and you had, like, the sun pouring down. I'm not sure if it was specifically during the story point where Groudon and Kyogre were wreaking havoc, but I do remember them. Some other things...
No, you're right.
Yeah.
It introduced weather into the game.
Yeah, right? So I think that was super cool, and then adding that to your battle formula was super amazing. This region has, like, my favorite Pokemon of all time, Latios. It's super cool. Dragon Pokemon, which I love. Psychic on top of that, which is one of my favorite typings. Those typings together, it's a super fast, cool jet-looking Pokemon, and it's just amazing. And what cements Latios as my number one, on top of that, is the movie featuring Latios and Latios is probably my favorite Pokemon movie of all time.
I see you're into bestiality. Because Ash kisses Latios.
I think it's the other way around, actually.
Whatever you say.
So
Whatever makes you sleep at night.
yeah, okay. That movie was one of my favorites because I still remember the one soundtrack from that movie, which is just so good. I don't know what it's called exactly, but man, I still remember that soundtrack. I love the movie and how it's set in like a town with like water flowing through. Again, this whole theme of water. I love when water's incorporated into like cities and towns. I think it's super cool. So that aspect of it, the story, the Pokemon, the lore, that's why Latios is up there for me as my number one. Now Rayquaza is another amazing legendary. It's in my top 10 for sure. And it's just an amazing dragon Pokemon that rules over the skies. And what cemented Rayquaza as one of my favorite was you have these two massive, powerful legendaries and Kyogre and Groudon battling it out. And this guy just pops up from the sky and is like, hey, quit it. And they go back. That's how baller of a Pokemon this is. He is so OP. And in addition to that, he has a black shiny variant, which just makes it look even crazier. And then if you've ever seen a shiny Mega Rayquaza, that thing is amazing. Probably one of my favorite Pokemon designs of all time. So,
honestly, when you told me your top Pokemon, I was surprised Rayquaza wasn't number one.
Yeah, I know Rayquaza, man, it's up there. I'm surprised it's as far back as it is, but at that level, they're so good that they could be anywhere on that list. Like, the order really doesn't matter to me.
Right, they're all interchangeable.
Yeah, and then again, the stars. Oh my goodness. I played through the game using every single one. That's how good these guys were. They're so good, I almost don't know which my favorite is. Blaziken is amazing. He's in my top 10. I'm surprised Sceptile isn't in my top 10, but Sceptile is amazing as well. And Swampert, again, that water ground typing, and then the muddy water move they introduced for it, super cool. Leaf Blade was an amazing move at the time, which was exclusive to Grovyle when it learned it first. And again, Blaziken was amazing. And I think, yeah, those are by far the best starters in any game. In addition to that, I really loved how the game had a little bit of a challenge to it. I liked how you had this island with this rocket, like a space program, and they had like a rocket where you could do an event to get Deoxys. That was a super cool element. I kind of disagree with you on the teams. I really enjoyed the Team Magma and Team Aqua storyline, because as I played the game, the more and more I got into their stories and, infiltrating the secret base and stuff, it felt like I got to do it twice in one game, right? Instead of going into, like, Team Rocket's big hideout, I got to go into Team Aqua's and then Team Magma's. And I think I'm talking specifically about Emerald here, because in the first two versions of the game, I think you only got to go through one and not the other. So that was a super cool aspect of it. Having two teams for the price of one was cool. Rayquaza and Blaziken are some of my favorites. I actually trained them to level 100. I think in my Emerald playthrough, I beat the Elite Four like 84 times or something like that. So like, I love this game so much I just could not stop playing it. It was like my favorite game of all time. Like when I was playing it, and then all that.
And again, that post game is actually fun to play.
Yeah, the post game, the Battle Frontier is amazing, and how they subtly hint at it in through the story. With I forget the guy's name. It's not Bill, but it's someone. He has these shades on. He comes and talks to you. He like builds like a rapport with you, and then after you beat Steven, he like invites you to this Battle Frontier. And the Battle Frontier is actually really difficult. Like, it's not a cakewalk. And trying to battle the leaders of each building at the Battle Frontier is super challenging to do. So it's even hard to fight them. And some of them have really strong Pokemon. I forget his name, but one of them has an Articuno. So those aspects of the game were super cool, super fascinating. I just think it's the complete game. All the Pokemon were amazing. The story's great. Your rival, I think it's Wally, is okay. Ralts was a cool Pokemon you could get in the beginning with Psychic. That was super cool. So I think all those make this my number one by far.
Oh, definitely a wonderful game. I don't even think I beat all the challenges in the Battle Frontier.
Neither did I.
And like you said, that movie was great. I don't think any movie will beat the Pokemon the first movie, just because of the emotion that comes out of that first one. And it's so good that they're making a remake of it. It's definitely, I love Emerald just as much as you do. Probably not just as much. I didn't put it as number one, but great region to play through. But my number one is pretty low on your list, but I might have a different view on it than you do. Is Johto. Now, again, I'm an old head. I had a Game Boy Color. I played Gold and Silver, the first iterations, and I loved them so much. And I always lean towards these earlier generations. Obviously, 1, 2, 3 are my top 3. But it's tough to separate the gameplay of the newer games, and the beauty and playability for each region. But I do feel as though that there's just so much that goes into the Johto region, even with the limited, hardware that the games had to use to utilize. And before I gush over them, I own 2 disc plates total. One has Ho-Oh, the other has Lugia. 2 Johto Pokemon. I know my top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Pokemon are from Kanto, and like I said, Kanto could easily be up here as well. But this one seemed like such a well thought out game because it was planned since Kanto came out. Because you hear about Ho-Oh and all the other Pokemon that are in Johto while you're in Kanto. And I love how the lore connects each region. And with that foresight in mind, it's great to see that, it all comes together in this nice little fashion. Speaking of the connection, there's a giant mountain.
Mount Silver,
where
right?
where you not only can face Red, but it's like a manga crossover, right? You get to face that main character from before and face his amazing team, and he's actually a challenge. Like, he's harder than Lance, I'd say, probably, with his super high level Pokemon, and great move sets, and he has all the starters from Kanto. He has that Pikachu. He has a Gyarados, I believe, and maybe a Dragonite. I'm not sure. I forget. But that was a challenging
I think he has a Snorlax.
Battle. Snorlax, you're right. And so the style of this game was amazing. And it takes place in Japan. So you can tell that they have some great, knowledge into the detail that they're going to put into all these, cities. With this essentially building off the lore of Kanto, it makes it quite a fun playthrough. And you can see the connections with all the legendaries and whatnot. And Team Rocket's back at it again. Because, Giovanni dispersed Team Rocket, but they're all in denial. And they need to get him back. And they're trying to become this evil organization once again because they don't know what to do. And, again, it builds on that lore of the Kanto region. I feel like a lot of my love for this game comes from the building aspect. There's no other game that's built around another, the previous generation. And I believe this is the only region that didn't introduce a Dragon Evolution line, and that didn't even matter because Tyranitar was introduced here, and it was just that cool. They were able to infuse so much culture in this game and give it a lot more of an urban feel. And given the creators' knowledge of the source land, they made some great cities. Like Ecruteak City was a really cool one with a lot of cool Japanese design. A lot of the other cities were very lacking, but you have to keep in mind that the fact that this game wasn't created to be a standalone game. It was created so that you can explore the Kanto region, which you loved so much previously. The legendaries of this game, although not as involved in the storyline, had probably some of the greatest lore. And I enjoyed the starters for this region too, personally. I love Feraligatr and Typhlosion. Meganium is meh at best. And the thing that also brings this region up is the rival. Because that rival is probably the best rival in all the games. Because he's actually a bad person. He's actually a cruel person who has ties to the evil syndicate Team Rocket. He's the son of Giovanni. And he steals his starter Pokemon, and he's just a bad guy. He pushes you whenever he battles you and loses. He is out there, not really training his Pokemon in the best way. I'm pretty sure he beats his Pokemon. And this rival, he actually goes through character progression. He begins to love Pokemon, and he actually grows as a character. And look at Hop. What is that guy?
Actually, fun fact, Hop is probably the strongest rival in the game. Do you know why?
Why?
He has a legendary.
Given to him. Good job, Hop. He doesn't know how to use it.
Isn't that just kind of funny?
He wouldn't know how to use a full team of legendary Pokemon.
Oh my goodness. He's actually
Silver would wipe the floor with Hop.
You think so? I think Zamazenta's pretty strong though. With that 725
Let me just
base
use... I don't care, man. I don't care. I think Silver can destroy Hop just because he's smarter than him. But right, so this boy, he goes through some character progression. He actually becomes a nice person. Well, he's still a little mean, but he comes to care for Pokemon at the end of the day. And the fact that he stole his Pokemon is still pretty cool to me. He's actually truly a nasty person compared to all the other rivals. He's just leagues above, in my opinion. And due to the failures of Team Rocket, he actually has a reason to hate the evil organization. So, there's more stuff there. Like, the lore and storyline alone make this game amazing. And I enjoy the soundtrack here, too. Johto, honestly, it was the perfect follow-up to an amazing region in Kanto. And that game just all together was such a fun game to play. I understand as a standalone, maybe not the greatest, but it was never meant to be a standalone region. So I don't think it's fair to criticize it as much, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where you're coming from. It just, I played none of the color games, like Game Boy Color games. Since my first, introduction to the games was Pokemon Leaf Green, the only exposure I really had to Johto was in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. So I started playing that really late. So I was, playing Kanto, Hoenn, and Sinnoh, I think, came out before Heart Gold, before I even got introduced to Johto. So that's why it's a little lower on the list for me. But I can see where you're coming from, since you played through the original implementation of the region, how it was meant to be first played through in the color games.
Heck yeah, man. Great region. I love it, man. But, hey, that rounds out our list.
Yeah.
This is actually a pretty long one.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've stretched to almost an hour and a half.
Crazy, man. Fun, though.
Yeah, for sure. There's just so much we can talk about with Pokemon, right?
Oh, definitely. We'll definitely have more Pokemon podcasts in the future if, the demand is there.
Yeah, for sure.
But, that being said, this has been the 1ND podcast. Thank you all for listening. Please follow us on all our social medias. We really appreciate you.
And
you got any last words?
No. I mean, thank you for listening, and 1ND out.